Hello, welcome again to Just for Farmers. I'm with Paul Harris. Say hello, Paul.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you listen to this.
Oh, he's so good at that. It's sickening, isn't it? And we're going to get straight in today with our expert guest speaker because we haven't got him for long because he's a busy chap. If he's not trying to grow a speaking and coaching and training business, he's wearing a pair of Speedos, swimming through sewage and jellyfish infested waters.
As you do.
Andy Stone. Andy, say hello.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
And I'm the only one who didn't do that.
Yeah.
I feel I'm missing out already.
You're the professional speaker.
So, Andy has got an incredible backstory. I'm not going to introduce him other than to say he has got a lot of transferable messages to the world of farming. And Andy, tell us if you can. We'll go into 3 or 4 things in depth, but if you had a 60-second potted history, what have you done? Where have you come from? Where are you going?
Okay, well, thanks for having me, first of all. And my name is Andy, and I am an alcoholic, and I am a cocaine addict. I am on the autism spectrum, and I am an ADHDer. And
Is that all?
Is that all?
Yeah. Well, no, and also a Guinness World Record holder.
There we go.
Yeah, sneak that one in. So yeah, I've kind of done the whole kind of cycle of difficult teen years, a complete misunderstanding of neurodiversity, the inability to know what it was and how to utilize it, and that led me to a really, really dark place, a lot of isolation, which made me dependent on alcohol and drugs to escape. And having gone through rehab, come out the other side, I'm now educating myself on everything that I've mentioned, and now I'm moving forward in a really, really positive way, to the degree that I am able to set Guinness World Records in enduring really difficult sports.
Wow.
Now,
hear a bit more about that.
Now, normally we'd start at the beginning, but let's get into the meaty stuff at the end. Let's start with what you're doing now. So you say Guinness Endurance World Record holder. Mm-hmm. Tell the little chickens listening to this what it is you went and did.
So I am still the current Guinness World Record holder for most 70.3 mile triathlons in a calendar year, which is a half iron distance. So it's a 1.2 mile pool swim, a 56 mile bike ride, and then a half marathon, which is 70.3 miles. And I did 70 of them in 75 days, which is more than anyone else had done in a year.
Why?
The question most of us are asking right now, why?
On earth did you do that? Yeah.
Well, it keeps me sane. Is the quick answer.
But what was the motivation to get started in that, Andy, initially?
So I had issues with myself. I needed to prove myself to myself. Through my teens, 20s, early 30s, I hadn't really succeeded professionally, financially. And because of that, I believe that I had to prove myself to myself. And through sport was the most fitting way. We kind of sat down and thought long and hard about what would be my kind of area of being able to really excel. And we came up with sport, and I'd already done well with sport, being an ADHD, crap at a lot of stuff, but nevertheless, stick a rugby ball in my hand and I was all right. Got a couple of dicky knees now, so had to be no contact, had to be outdoors, it had to be, we had a load of boxes that we wanted to tick with it. And yeah, the big motivation was to prove myself to myself. And I think because of the resilience that I'd accrued going through recovery of addiction, and then stick it into another platform, and I was just able to deal with it.
This is fascinating, Andy, because we've just recorded, and depending on whether you haven't listened to it yet, check out the session with Amy Wilkinson. She's just been talking all
Rawlinson.
About, what did I say?
Amy Rawlinson.
Amy Rawlinson. Forgive me, Amy. Forgive me. It's Amy Rawlinson. About purpose, about having a purpose. And what you decided, you just described exactly what Amy was describing this morning.
Yeah.
You had a purpose, a reason for doing what you were doing.
Absolutely.
But why did you go straight into the marathons, or did you not start small? Most people say, start small and warm up. Go straight into the Ironman type stuff. What was the reason for that?
So it was second lockdown, and as I mentioned, I have been through rehab, and I am a recovering alkie. And second lockdown was really difficult. It was winter. I'd landed back in the UK with a bit of a bump. I was repatriated from the Cayman Islands, where I had a flourishing diving career, scuba diving with the Americans. And I all of a sudden was back in a house in the town I was trying to get away from, wondering what had gone on, and found it incredibly difficult. And my mental health deteriorated, despite all the sort of tools that I'd learned through AA. And I nearly had a drink. My partner now is, the irony isn't lost on us. She's a gin producer. Yeah, right. So there's literally her
Choose your partners carefully is what we normally say.
crikey. Her prize bottles, that her recipes that she sold so many units of, are dotted around the house on shelves at eye level. So yeah, I literally got to the point where I stood up off the sofa to go to find a bottle of gin, to drink it, to relapse. And between standing up and opening the bottle, I changed my mind. And myself and Sally had a very grown-up conversation. And because it was still lockdown, all the leisure centres were still closed. I couldn't go to the gym. There's none of that going on. And so, again, one of the reasons that we came up with triathlon is because I could just go out and start running. Yeah. I could just go out and start riding a bike. And so that kind of started to develop. We then came up with the idea, and as time went on, things started to open back up again. And I started off actually with the challenge with 17 sprint distance triathlons. Now, sprints are a 400-metre swim, a 12-mile ride, and a 3-mile run. So it's around about 17 miles, give or take. And I did 17 of them in a row. And then I trained over the summer, did 35 Olympic distance.
You say in a row, you mean subsequent days? Or?
Yes, so no rest day. Wow. Yeah, because I've never done anything like that. So
how did you keep yourself motivated during that time? How did you keep yourself going?
That then comes down to accountability. So it's kind of letting people on social media know. So you kind of put it out there enough for you kind of have that accountability that you can't let people down.
So is fear a bigger motivator? And I mean this very pragmatically. Is a fear of what might go wrong if you don't do this a bigger motivated by look what I can achieve if I can do it?
That is a really good question, and I think there's a lot of science to do that I haven't done yet, and I'm fascinated by it. But it's the concept of the training mindset. So if let's say you do a couch to 5k or a 10k or a half marathon, whatever run you want to book into, but an actual event where you pay the money, you arrive on the day, and it's all organised. The training mindset is still quite relaxed. It's still, oh, I don't feel great today. Oh, the weather's crap today. Oh, it's freezing. Oh, whatever. Pick an excuse, and you don't do the event. You don't do the training. But then, as soon as you arrive at the start line of the event on race day, you are going to get round that distance no matter what. And that flick in mindset, I still need to research further. But the point being, even though my 17s and 35s, the build up to the 70s, weren't actual events, I'd kind of made them as such in my own mind. So once I started on day one of the 17s and day one of the 35s, imagine it like you're doing that marathon or that 10k or whatever it is, but every day for 17 days. It just happens to be a 17-day long challenge. And so that mindset is definitely there. And I think there is, David, a lot to do with pride and fear and ego of I will do this now. But as time went on and the events got bigger, on the roll up to the actual 70s, which was the following April, other companies had started to get involved. So people were financially investing in what I said I was going to do. Documentary film company, companies that were on board with equipment, powders, all that kind of sporting stuff. And so once people had invested in me, then the accountability was much higher as well.
Sponsorship's a big thing, isn't it? I'm just literally, I get it. I'm just doing a walk at the moment for charity.
Okay.
Nothing like what you're doing. It's 100 kilometres I'm aiming for in a month for Dementia UK.
Nice.
But what I'm doing, what's interesting is the everyday piece. So just walking a small distance every day, partly for fitness. I'm a bit older than you, I think. But what I've also done, I've added an extra challenge of recording a video every day for the letters of the alphabet. And it's that extra challenge that gets me out of bed in the morning to do the walk. Okay. So I had an extra reason to do it. Now, it could be sponsorship, it could be people who are interested. So is it true sometimes that we've got an intrinsic motivation, but sometimes it's helpful if we are held accountable to something. Was that part of the addiction process as well with AA? Not accountability, but you had a regularity of going back and revisiting and knowing you'd have to speak up. Is that sort of that accountability piece? I think is quite interesting.
I think you're right there, and I think once you have, because as a part of AA is you get a sponsor, so it's an individual who's been in the fellowship and the program for over 12 months. They have 12 months of clean sobriety. And you can ask them and say, can you take me through the steps, please? And then, yeah, once you kind of engage with that individual, you don't want to waste their time. And there are criteria that individual will give you to make sure that they know that you are real about it. Because obviously the relapse and early recovery is very frequent for some people. And so they want to know if you're in. And if you are, you ask them, and if you ask them, they give you this criteria, and then once you then build this kind of relationship with this individual, and you don't want to let them down.
I think accountability is a really interesting area, and it's one that when we're talking about farming and behaviour on farm, I often talk about a culture of accountability where we're accountable to our colleagues, who we take ownership, we don't have the blame culture, all that sort of jazz. So I think, when you're doing a big event, is it just you that you feel accountable to, or do you feel accountable to the people who sponsored you and supported you and put money in? Is that what also helps to drive you on?
Absolutely, yeah. It's massive, and it does. The more you get into it, the more that accrues, and the more responsible, I guess, you are for that all going smoothly and keeping relationships healthy. And there is a pressure to a degree, and
a good pressure?
Yeah, I think because I've got to where I've got to with my mental health and with my recovery from addiction, I think that the individuals around me could see that all of a sudden I was well and I was healthy and I was investable. And I had put that time and effort and energy in, so it was on their part as well. I mean,
builds trust.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
So talk to us a bit about your ADHD. You mentioned that, and I know, again, working in the industry as I do, that often clients will ring me and say, "Oh, you need to give me a hand with this chap or this girl because I'm convinced they've got ADHD because they're unfocused, they're forgetting what they want to do. I ask them to do 3 things and they go and do 4 others." How has that affected your life, and when did you discover really that you had ADHD?
That's a really good question. And yes, all of those things have been relevant for me. I was first of all diagnosed as a kid, so I was kind of mid-teens. I was sent to the local comp with my brother, just a local school, Graham Balfour in Stafford, and just couldn't get on with the classroom environment. I wasn't a bad kid as such, but one thing that I will kind of put in at this point is how I am affected by foodstuffs. So colourings, flavourings, preservatives, E-numbers, refined sugar, ultra-processed food of all kinds. My mum and dad had a handle on that through primary school and would really shield me as best they could from eating a poor diet. And so
I know where this is going.
Mate, as soon as you get to high school, you get a few quid, you get a little bit of pocket money maybe, and then you can leave school, go to the local shop, to the tuck shop, whatever it may be, and then all of the stuff that you've been sort of starved of, that all the other kids have been eating in front of you for years, I was kind of gorging on.
Then you discover pubs and kebabs.
Yeah. And so people who kind of say, oh, weed's like a gateway drug, I think that sugar and ultra-processed food are a gateway, because it's the same reward system in the brain that is fighting for them. But anyway, so I had that diagnosis professionally as I left at my first school. I was then sent to Stafford Grammar School, smaller classes, private school, better results and better sort of prospects for me, really, I guess, in mum and dad's eyes. I was expelled from there as well. All the same problems came with me. Everywhere you go, there you are. And it wasn't a great environment for me. Things started kicking off at home between myself and mum and dad, who were wonderful. Mum and dad are still together. I love the bones of both of them, and they did everything that they could. But in the 80s and 90s, there was no book on My Child's Got ADHD for them to read. And so we were going in blind with it all a little bit. And the drugs were offered, but rugby was going places at the time. It was sort of late 90s when rugby was going professional. I had prospects, and they didn't want to interfere with my training with meds. And so I didn't ever try Ritalin. But then I moved out of home for the time of my GCSEs, and I was living at a mate. So things were really, really difficult. And then at the end of my teens, I then discovered alcohol, ecstasy, marijuana, ketamine, magic mushrooms, you name it. And I kind of saw it as like a coming of age, like a rite of passage, like I've discovered nightclubs, like here we go, I'm an adult now. Whereas actually what I was doing is my chimp brain, my limbic system was going, okay, well, that feels good. Well, remember that one definitely helped us to escape from all my home problems, all my school problems. And so then as I got into adulthood, I then found it very, very difficult not to go near those substances. And it kind of accrued. And that's where my inability to function as neurotypicals do and hold a job down and be stable and be calm and reliable and all of these wonderful things that people are in their kind of lives and their professional lives especially, but people were getting mortgages and having kids and doing well, and why wasn't I, and then the frustration comes. But then with the frustration comes the shame. Like I heard a podcast recently where they estimate, I know 98% of the statistics are made up, but it seemed to be a reliable source that kids with ADHD, once they reach 18, have had 20,000 more negative interactions than neurotypical kids.
Wow.
And so kind of when you combine that with social media and all this idyllic stuff that you see online that people surround themselves with all day now, the victim mindset all of a sudden becomes incredibly difficult to get away from. And then that's when the true isolation begins and the real addiction and the really nasty end of alcohol and drug addiction.
So were you, go on Dave, go on.
I was going to say, so I'm going to take you back a few minutes. You were talking about support and accountability and how in some areas you really thrived receiving that support and accountability. I know from my own research with top achievers that really effective people run towards support and accountability where most people tend to run away from it. So I know in the past when we've chatted, Andy, that you've suggested that, you know, there are certain parts of your life where it's almost like a switch that you alluded to earlier. You can run towards that support, accountability, and in other areas of your life you tend to run away from it. Do you know what that switch is?
Wow, that's a question.
It is. It's a good one. And I think, yes, first of all, I think I am aware of the switch. Having any control over it as an ADHDer is something quite different. Like I now am mentoring alternative ed kids, and that is job number 63. So I'm 43, started working at 16. So if a job lasts me 6 months, that's good going. And so, which is why I had this desire to prove myself through the triathlons, which we spoke about earlier. But I have precious little ability to choose what it is that I run away with. So what I mean by run away with is when my dopamine reward pathway actually really truly fires on something, that I can do it as well as anyone else, and sometimes surpass them in some areas. However, when someone gives me a task to do, like I worked in kitchens for 10 years, and if you've got a prep list when you first get in and someone says, right, I need the top 3 doing first, if I didn't want to do the task that was at the top, I would procrastinate to the degree that I would get a bollocking, and often disciplinary, because I physically can't get my brain to pick or to do what my brain doesn't want to do. Like and then the reason I stayed at the kitchen that I eventually stayed at for such a long time is because I could rock up and do the list in the order that I wanted to do it in.
And this is so important. This is so important for people listening, because both whether you're listening as somebody who's really resonating with Andy's message and story here, whichever part of it, particularly ADHD part, or you're an employer listening to somebody who you think you've got someone like this in your team. Your example there of, I just can't get started on something. People often think, my limited understanding of ADHD is people often think people who've got that condition, that neurodiversity, is they just are easily distracted. They're all over the place. But actually there's this almost flip side of procrastination of, I just can't get started. So in your experience, Andy, how do people manage you? How did they manage to get the best out of you?
So I think,
Almost when did it work and when did it not work? Almost?
yeah, I think the disciplinarian boss or the disciplinarian supervisor, we just immediately lock horns, because then it's the whole kind of male ego, alpha argument or conversation that would then flare up, rather than if I have a boss who was understanding. And I didn't want mollycoddling. That's the other thing. It's like, oh, poor Andy. I didn't need putting back into the victim mindset. What it was I kind of almost needed enough stick and carrot. I needed the manager to know, to understand me, which I know.
That is so important what you've just said.
Right.
And again, if you're listening to this as a message, take that one away. First message from today is what your staff need is understanding, and the neurodiversity that is existing in farming that we know about. A lot of the people I talk to is my boss just doesn't get me. And actually what we also have is a large proportion of personality styles in farming that are, what you call them, very disciplinarian, very direct and very blunt. Just telling you to get on with it, I bet didn't work.
Oh my God, I've had old school bosses. Like I had a guy that we as soon as I played for the rugby team, we clicked immediately. And he was a great guy, loads of banter, all of that. The second he said, "Oh, do you want a job? I've got a job. I need a labourer on site. Do you want to come down Monday morning?" The second I started working for him, our relationship just completely changed. And he went authoritarian, disciplinarian, old school, building site, and I couldn't do it. I lasted about 2 weeks.
So in terms of, you say what you did respond to was that understanding. How was that manifested? How did it make you feel? And what did the person do to show that they understood how you're wired?
That's a very good question. So it often comes from personal experience from them on whatever level, whether that be neurodiverse or whether that had been sort of alcohol early recovery and those kind of jobs that I was getting, something that I knew I could just get on site and do whilst I was still a bit shaky. And so a boss who kind of was empathetic and sympathetic to the cause to a degree, normally through personal experience, but just wanting to get along. Because I think one thing I will put in for neurodiverse people who, like myself, who have had a number of different jobs, they are giving a lot of thought to whether or not they should go in for that job. Should they go for that or not? And I would ask my parents, I'd ask my wife, now ex-wife at the time, should I be doing this? Well, Andy, it's this, it's outdoor, it's physical, you know this person, it's got this potential. Yes, I think that's a good role for you. So before I even put myself there, I thought, right, want this one. Here we go. And I was motivated. It's like kids at school. It's like, miss, I'm gonna do the best writing today. Miss, I want to do really, really well. And this is exactly how I was. So I'd arrive in class, arrive in work with every intention of excelling and doing well. And I'd kind of get partway through it and go, and then at school, then you start playing up and you start acting out, and because you don't know what else to do. But in the workplace, if the boss then at that point wasn't able to kind of nurture me to a degree and understand and say, okay, go and do that, or change my direction, or give me a distraction of some kind, then the frustration would also come, and I'd normally be able to grind through to the end of the day and then go and get drunk and go and escape, and then it would start the next day, and so I don't know if that answered your question or not really. What specific?
It absolutely did, and I
Okay.
think it did. Don't worry, absolutely did. And if you haven't, I'll ask you another one. So don't worry about that.
Okay.
But in terms of, it's really helpful, I think, for people to hear from somebody who's both experienced it in the workplace and at school. I say, I'm just repeating myself. There are people listening I know that will resonate with you, because I meet, again, farm owners who get so frustrated with members of staff because they'll give them a list of 4 jobs in the morning, verbally normally. They don't get to write anything down. And then by the time the morning's gone, the member of staff's done 3 other things that weren't on the list because they got bored. Yeah. And so, whereas what you're saying is, if you just work with that person and you understand that that's a likelihood, maybe would this have worked for you? Look, this is just the task to do for now. When you've done that one, then come back, we'll have a chat again and do the next one, rather than overwhelming you with too many things to think about.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, that is definitely how I am. So if I walk in, it's like there's a list of 12 things to prep. It's like, right, Andy, you're doing that first, and I'd just go and I'd freeze. However, if you said, right, Andy, we've got these 4 things, which one do you want to do? And then by giving me the option of the preferable one, because it's the whole concept, you've got to eat your frog, But if you don't, you can do the nicest one, then you'll go off and you will do it with bells on, and you'll do it to the nth degree, and it'll be great. And then you come back, right, I've got another 4 things. Which one of them do you want? And so, yeah, it's giving the ADHD their dopamine reward pathway, the option that they want to select, so that their dopamine goes, and that's the thing with ADHD. You've either got all the dopamine in the world or none.
Yeah.
And so if you can get that dopamine to fire on a task in a workplace, you're golden.
And this is what I've said to people. I said to Dave before you came, that to me ADHD is a superpower. Often people see it as, and understandably, you've been through it. It can hold you back. It can cause all sorts of issues. But it used in the right way, you've just said, if you want to get someone to do something really effectively and probably quick and efficiently, just give that person that's going to really thrive in that.
Yeah.
They'll do it better than anybody else. I talk a lot about in farming, we have a quite high level of neurodiversity and autism and dyslexia and all these sort of patterns in farming. And actually, if we get the person in the right way, they're fantastic. Somebody who's on the autistic spectrum will be often brilliant at attention to detail. Will get things absolutely bang on, and they love that routine and that structure. So it's just about working with it, is it not, rather than working against it?
Yeah, for sure. And then everyone's happy. And that you say ADHD can be your superpower. Absolutely, it can, and you can set world records.
Exactly.
Or it can be kryptonite. And you can just be literally almost banging your head against the wall, not being able to function.
And the last thing we want to do is turn farmers and farmhands into hobby psychologists, analysing people in their employ. But if there were a couple of things that people on the farm should perhaps pay attention to, what would they notice that might help them understand them better or communicate better with them? What kind of signals should you be looking out for?
I think the obvious one is when people go quiet. I think a noisy ADHD is a happy ADHD. I think it's when people clam up.
True.
You've got to watch them, and that's then when they'll go off and the victim mindset starts, and then they'll start acting out and hiding things and lying, and that's when all the deceit can come from the shame. And so I would definitely say a quiet ADHD is one to watch. And
so what you're saying is, if somebody's normally quite ebullient and fizzy and energetic, and then suddenly they start to go quiet, that's normally an indication of what? That they're unhappy or they're unsettled? Or...
Yeah, absolutely. I'm of the opinion, like when I'm bouncing around work, and you give me that list of 4, right, Andy, okay, love your energy, which one of these do you want to do, mate? I'll do that one, right, bang. And then it's then flow state here. Runners talking about flow state, but you can get that in any area of your life. You could be writing an essay, you could be doing a task at work that's going to take you 2 or 3 hours, you can be doing anything. And if you can then just go, right, fully charged today, here I go, and you're doing a task that you want to do, and you're getting paid for it, and everyone's happy, and then you'll be singing, and you'll be the life and soul, and you'll be enthusiastic, and then it's good for morale. And I think as soon as you then start trying to compress someone and go and just go, no, you're making too much noise, go and do that, and
go stand in a field, scare some crows a bit.
Well, often I get the description will be, this guy Andy, he comes in the morning at 3 o'clock in the morning on the farm, morning, and he's full of energy. And we're all going, oh, for God's sake, let me have a cup of tea. And they try and suppress it. They try and suppress that part of that person's personality. Whereas you're saying, go with that flow, because if you can direct that person in the right way, they will be incredibly effective for you.
Absolutely. And
So just flipping the conversation slightly, where else can we learn about your journey? Because we talked a lot there about ADHD, which I think is really helpful for our audience. But addiction to whatever subject, and it can be, it hasn't got to be alcohol and drugs. It can be pornography. It can be exercise. Even we can get addicted to stuff.
Work.
Absolutely. We can be absolutely addicted to work. How has addiction worked? Obviously against you, we can understand that. But how have you used that now to work for you in this next stage of your life?
Yeah, good question. And I think because I am in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm very open about that, and always I completely respect the anonymous side of AA. And would never bring anybody else up, but I'm able to sort of put my flag up for the anonymous fellowships, of which there's over 200.
Wow.
So it's, yeah, Alcoholic Anonymous, Narcotic Anonymous, Marijuana Anonymous, Spot Squeezers Anonymous.
No.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that the human brain can go down and get attached to and isolate. And it's, for me, addiction is when it's costing you more than money, when it's having a negative impact on you or others around you. It's all this kind of stuff. And so once I had educated myself in it, because I had no idea. I just thought I was a bloke in his mid-30s who liked to drink and you drink if you had my problems, and was very defensive and didn't have any pieces of the jigsaw. And I'd gone off in completely the wrong direction with it all. And then it wasn't until someone pulled me up and said, Andy, you need rehab. And then I was like, do you know what? Yeah, I do. And eventually I went in, and then the education started, and then the acceptance of the situation and the severity of where it had got to, and the whole new trajectory that it sent me on. I was incapable of working for 6 months. So it was purely learning about addiction, about mental well-being, about physical well-being, about spiritual well-being, all of the kind of areas of our life. And then once I was on that path, I knew that the healthier that I got on all of those levels, the less I was going to need to escape. And I've heard another thing recently as well, is the more true you are to you, the less you need to escape that life.
Yeah.
And that's what I now know. And it's, it's come what may, I try and be me. I've taken off all the masks. I'll give you an example. In early recovery, myself and my ex-wife had got new partners, and it was a mutual mate's 40th birthday. And we'd gone to this venue, and there was friends from all over the place, and it was a lovely do. I was terrified because I was sober. And there must have been 5 different social circles in that same room, including my ex and her new fellow, which is always awkward. But all of a sudden, I couldn't have any masks on. I couldn't be that Andy to them and that Andy to them. I had to just be me. And it was from that point that I kind of really, really wanted to take the masks off. And
was that liberating for you?
oh my God, it was terrifying and it was hard. But now I've reached a point where I'm just me, and I can be me, guilt-free. And it's come from this whole, like I mentioned, the trajectory of going sober and having to learn how to be well. And like I say, the weller I am, the less I want to drink. But I then got to the point where I was that well and that energized that we thought, okay, perhaps 526 hours of exercise in 10 weeks sounds like a good idea. And so the world record was the equivalent of 4 lengths of the English Channel, and then going from Calais to Beijing, cycling and running.
This is bonkers.
Yeah, but I was able to deal with that because of the early work that I'd done in recovery and what I'd learned and how well I was. It was like, right, okay, well, let's test it. And I came out the other side and I didn't need a drink.
I'd just like to pull up on 2 great quotes there. And I don't know if they're yours or theirs.
They are now.
They are now.
Write it down quick.
When it's costing you more than money. Now, that's the first one. The one is when it's easier to be true to you, it's easier to escape. What was that?
Oh, yeah. So the more true to yourself that you are, the less you need to escape your life.
Now, without going sort of all slow, deep tone and radio, I don't want to go Radio 4 hobby psychologist on people here, but if anybody is listening to this and his incredible journey and his thought processes, the work he's had to go through to get to where he is and who he is today, if anybody is listening to this and realizing that they're seeing a little bit of themselves in Andy's story, especially on the addiction side, do something about it. Make this a call to action. Do something about it. Reach out to people who you trust. You don't even have to like these people. You have to trust them. There's a difference. So go to your doctor if you trust them. Go speak to your friends and family. Can I promise you, everyone's got those 1, 2, 3 normally at most friends They wouldn't just help you move a box. They wouldn't help you move house. They'd help you move a dead body. These types of friends, the ones you could trust through thin and thick and thick and thick. And trust them to give you some advice. Trust them to stand by you. But do something about it. Because if it really begins to cost you more than money, it's not just the farm. It's you. It's your family. It's the people that work with you. Don't think it's okay. Do something about it.
I was going to ask Andy actually, because we may or may not have young farmers listening to this or watching this, and the young farmers as a group have a bit of a bad press. Really, there's a lot of alcohol involved, a lot of pretty good debauchery in terms of, and there's in the press at the moment in June 2024.
Can anyone join?
Yes, exactly. Let's have a bit more debauchery. There's a little bit of discussion in the farming press at the moment about the way that young farmers behave and operate. And as somebody who's been through that sort of alcohol phase and everything else, what would you say? What if you got any advice you would give to somebody who's maybe feels themselves slipping down that path?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first thing that I always think about is, everyone wants a good time, and go and let your hair down, and while you're young and all of that good stuff. It's great. And I had a lot of good times on it with alcohol and my mates and rugby lads and all of that. However, if you think there might be a problem, there probably is.
Yeah.
And so there is now more and more young individuals cottoning onto this and starting to realise some of the negative side effects of alcohol. And
kids are drinking less, aren't they?
They genuinely are drinking less, absolutely. And try it. Try and go for, if you're thinking you're going to go out on the lash, go and have 2 pints. Go and have a pint. Drive home. See how it feels. Do it a few times. And the point of that is it's stopping before
it's costing you more than
yeah, absolutely
money.
that.
Yeah.
And so it's a fantastic test of being able to go out and just have a couple of pints consistently. And maybe they now reckon the real sort of anal doctors are researching it and saying 2 drinks a week is your limit. So if you if you're north of that, okay, you might be having a negative effect on some part of your body physically, your liver, your kidneys, your brain cells, whatever it may be. But with regards to mood and mentality and morale in the workplace and kind of all of this stuff, it stems massively from what we put in our bodies. So if the hangover, and again, this affects you more as you get older.
Yeah, not made of rubber anymore.
Exactly that. And so if it's lasting one day, Monday feel crap. Well, Tuesday I still feel a bit crap today. Wednesday, still procrastinating, I'll do it tomorrow. And if that's the side effect of your drinking, then it's probably costing you more than money. And
just picking up on what Dave said about reaching out, I'm just interested for you. And again, we don't want this to sound too heavy, as if this is a psychological episode, but I think there's some really important help that Andy's offering here. Where did you reach out to when you said you got to that point where I think it was a friend said to you, you need to go into therapy or whatever? Where did you meet out? Where did you?
Well, I kind of already got a handle on it. I was always trying to do Stoptober or dry January, or I'm not drinking till my birthday. I'm not drinking till this time. And let's say it was a month. I'm not going to drink for a month. And I get a few days or a week or so in and go, that's enough. Like a week detox, that was probably enough. I can have a couple of pints, and then I was back off for the races again. So having witnessed that pattern repeatedly, I kind of knew that I wanted to stop. And it was when I'd kind of had my ex-wife, we live in the same village, and we did at the time, and she'd heard the reports of my behaviour when I was drinking, and she then reported that back to my mum and dad, despite us being split up, and it was suggested to me, maybe you should go to rehab. And then, of course, it was the old Amy Winehouse. They say I've got to go to rehab, and I said, no. I get that now, because to start with, you go, I went immediately defensive. No, I haven't got a problem. No, how dare you?
Yeah.
You drink if you had my problems. Leave me alone. And then guess what I did? Went and got
drink.
pissed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Drunk. I got drunk.
Exactly.
And and so then it was kind of, you know what? Actually, what have I got to lose? I have nothing to lose and everything to gain. by stopping drinking. And so I did. I went and got sober.
It's fantastic. And lastly then, so what piece of advice would you give an employer? One piece of advice you're giving an employer who's listened to this maybe, and maybe is thinking, I've got members of my staff who may be showing signs of this. They're turning up with alcohol on their breath, they're always hungover, or they're this neurodiversity you've talked about, maybe somebody that's a bit different. What piece of advice could you give an employer on how to handle you?
It's a good question. I think first of all would be go and educate yourself on the subject. Educate yourself on alcohol or drug addiction, whatever the addiction of the individual is that you're suspecting. Go and learn about it. There's so much information. There's podcasts, there's books, there's individuals that you can phone, there's helplines. I would say learn more. Self-knowledge has been amazing for me. And again, with the neurodiversity thing as well, it's learn what it's about. It's not the 80s anymore. And one of the things that really frustrates me is the neurodiverse kids that I'm currently working with who have had diagnoses because they've been expelled from school and they are an alternative ed and they've had a diagnosis. So you've had an ADHD diagnosis. Yes. What is ADHD? It's attention deficit hyper. Yeah. What is ADHD? Don't know.
They don't know.
And even the individuals who've received a bona fide doctor's diagnosis don't know. So if they don't know, the chances of their boss knowing, unless they've had a personal experience at home perhaps, is even less. So my advice would be education. Is go and learn.
I'm hearing it was once said by, was it one of the Labour government said we've got three priorities: education, and education. And I think that's almost summarising what you've said. Go and learn about it, whether you're experiencing it yourself or whether you're an employer who's got staff who appear to be either neurodiverse or having difficulties. Before we judge, let's educate ourselves.
Yeah, and I think it's be nice to them, because neither of those things are their fault. If once you've fallen into the trap of addiction, that is no longer the individual's fault. And neurodiversity, I mean, you're born with that. Yes, there's now this kind of thought process that ADHD diagnoses are going up, and there's now people thinking that's as a consequence of lifestyle choices. So it's prolonged poor nutrition, it's alcohol, it's poor sleep, it's whatever it may be, but those symptoms actually are very, very similar to ADHD. So is it true ADHD or is it just lifestyle choices? So I think, just if it is true addiction and true ADHD or whatever neurodiversity it is, be nice to them, because they're probably fighting a battle that you don't know, and it's starting to show a little bit. So the boss may be getting conscious of it because it's starting to come out sideways. And so they are doing their best to contain it. And so to kind of go and blow it all open could be a bit dangerous. But I would say go in nicely, go in calmly, understand it, educate yourself in it, and just sit and talk to them. You're a human being.
So if people want to get hold of you, how can they do that, Andy?
Good question. I've got a website. All my details are on there. That's andy-stone.com. All the info on kind of what you would need to get hold of me, the kind of things that I've been talking about. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing at the minute, which is a load of swimming, I'm set to swim the Channel in September. And should we, touch wood, get funding for it, I would like to be the first person to officially swim the Atlantic. So I'll be swimming from North Brazil to West Africa.
For those who are listening rather than watching, my jaw just dropped to the floor when you said
that was the third
across the Atlantic. That was the first person to do that.
Well, there was a French guy, Ben Lecomte, who did it in the 90s. He swam from Cape Cod back to France. And Cape Cod is where they actually filmed Jaws. So there is great whites in that water. But he didn't have the tech, he didn't have a GPS, and so he did it too quickly. It's not feasible to have done in that time, and so they're saying that he would have got on the boat, drifted overnight, and not swum the true distance. So it's officially doing it. So if you want to keep up with that, that's all on Instagram, which is Atlantic Swim Andy.
Wow. Andy, well, I'm personally very, very privileged to know
thank you, mate.
Call you a friend.
Likewise.
And thank you for your
David.
time and generosity today.
You're welcome.
I don't think there's anything left to say now other than start paying attention. Don't be afraid of dealing with the problem, be it in somebody else or in yourself. See you again on another Just for Farmers. We're going to have a really short piece from James, the body fix coach, something that'll help your well-being. But remember, it's advisable to speak to your doctor before you start any significant exercise regime. Enjoy.
Okay, so what we're going to look at now is farmer's walk. So I'm guessing throughout your day that you pick up a lot of stuff when you're walking down the fields, whether that's concrete slabs, fence posts, or whatever that may be. So I've got a set of farmer's walk handles as we're in a strongman gym, so I thought it'd be quite handy just to have a look at the technique and think about what we've previously applied to our lifting, our manual handling, a little bit of training. Right, so I'm just going to move these around to the sides just so it becomes a bit more clear on video. So I've got a set of handles that there's about 1 metre long, and we can load weights on top of them to make them more difficult as we go. But what we want to think about doing, to pick anything up as we did on the last video, is a nice hinge movement rather than using our lower backs to lift. So I'm standing with my feet hip width apart, so ankles, knees and hips in line, chest is up nice and tall, so I've got a nice tall spine. I've got that car door behind me which is open, and I've got a button on the floor, so I'm going to close that car door by hinging, pushing my bum backwards. I'm going to put my chest on that button on the floor, and I've got my handles beside me, so I'm just going to take a nice grip of those handles. I want to think about keeping my shoulders back on this so I'm not too far over, and I'm looking straight forward when I lift. So I'm taking a nice deep breath into my core, and again I'm pushing through my feet and my knees to lift up to initiate the movement, and once I'm up here I'm nice and stacked on top of myself, so my chest is stacked on top of my hips are stacked on top of my ankles. So if we're carrying a lot during the day, again arms can probably get very tired, so just to initiate a little bit more strength work into your upper back, you've got a big muscle at the top of your back called your trapezius, big triangle shaped muscle. So if we can pull our shoulders back, squeeze that muscle, instantly I've took a lot of work away from my arms. That trapezius is doing a lot of the work. Now as the day goes on, it may start to get tired, so I will show you a few stretches a little bit later on in the series to ease those off. But all we're going to concentrate on doing, keeping my chest nice and tall as we go for a walk, keep the belly button pulled in, a nice brace in the core, and off we go.
So the important thing here is keep your back straight, pull your shoulders back so the top of your shoulders are doing the work rather than your arms.
Absolutely.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we're outside now, so we might get heckled by either sheep or a passing tractor or car or something, but James is going to show us how you can use things around the farm to loosen yourself up, get more mobile and work some core strength.
Okay, so what we're going to be using for this short episode is a tractor tyre. So perhaps you've got something that's laying around the farm that you can use that's simple. I'm going to show you a couple of exercises to build some strength throughout the body. So we've already gone over some manual handling and how to lift things properly, so we're going to start applying that to this tyre. So I'm going to show you a deadlift, a tyre flip with the correct technique that you can use, and we might just go over some squats as well, just using the tyre, just sitting onto it, sitting off to strengthen up your legs or your quads, etc. So I'm going to lift this tyre and flip it. And
remember guys that you should not really be doing this if you're by yourself on the farm, and if you've got any health concerns, do consult a doctor first, eh?
100%. So first we'll go over to the correct technique before we start flipping things over. So tractor tyres are a little bit different from lifting anything else. Again, we're going to have to use mostly our legs, our hamstrings and our glutes, and we might have to use a bit of a knee power as well to get this one over. But I'm just going to stand at the side to start with before I flip it so David can see what I'm doing. So for this one, legs are going to go a lot wider than normal, and we're going to think about keeping our chest up nice and tall. And I'm going to start bending my knees, and I want to sort of just keep my chest up as I sit down. I'm just lowering my bum down between my legs. I'm going to place my hands underneath the tyre anywhere I can grab hold of it. It feels comfortable. Chest is up nice and tall, and I'm going to not use my arms. I'm going to push through my legs to lift. Nice and simple. So again, what we have here is the 1940s piece of.
Now, as luck would have it, in the next unit, this nice guy who restores furniture is lifting his cabinet out the van. James has offered to help, and you can now see the difference between lifting properly and not lifting properly, because James has got a straight back, straight arms, holding it close, and the other guy was sadly struggling. Hi, I'm still David. This is still Paul Harris.
Hi.
And he's done it again. And we're going to drill down on a little section that you would love more of, but you don't think you need it, which is happiness. Now, we're going to try and get a happiness expert on the podcast for you. But one of my best friends in the world is Dr. Andy Cope. He's a clever bloke. You get clever through osmosis standing next to him. And he did Europe's first PhD on the subject of happiness. Part of his studies found that if an average life of, let's just say, 82 years, and by the way, Paul's got a great stat about the fact that the average farmer only is about 60 years in their life. Ouch, in the UK. 82 years, you've got 30,000 days to use up. Now, that sounds a lot. And if you tell your kids you've got 30,000 days, they go, yeah. But when you're our age, when you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, let's just do a little bit of thing. Right? I did a little bit of research. The average person in the UK, right, they spend, and farmers I bet do a lot more than this, 3,700 days of their life working, and I bet you do more.
Farmers, that's based on having weekends off and things like that, so no way farmers will do a lot more than that.
They spend 1,600 days eating. They spend 92 days on the toilet.
Hang on. We don't have toilets on farms.
Yeah,
so,
not at once. Okay, 92 days crouching behind the tractor or
Exactly.
staring at a hedgerow. 1,200 days travelling. Now, some people, that's a commute to work. For you, I bet you do more than that in the tractors. Yeah, and in the Land Rover, going to the pub on a Sunday. Now, all of these things add up. And you think, yeah, what we got left, Dave? Well, if at the age of 60, Paul found something that reckons that's 70% of your hours gone.
Scary, isn't it? And if the average age of the farmer, specifically in the UK, the latest research shows the average age of a farmer still working in the UK is 59. So if we're in that group where we are nearly 60 and we've only got 30% of our time left, which is a bit of a sobering and maybe even mildly depressing thought. And then I added on, Dave, what do you think the average member of the public, what word would they use to describe the average farmer, do you think? Is it joyous? Is it bounding around with untold happiness?
Let's think about this. Well, I actually think most farmers are really nice, genuinely nice people. But sometimes they can appear or give the impression or the illusion of being a tad grumpy.
Exactly.
Right. A little bit.
And that is the word, isn't it? If you ask the general member of the public, how would you describe the average UK farmer, they'd probably say something like grumpy. Now, we know that's a perception, but certainly in my experience, and we might be thinking this subject of happiness is a little bit fluffy, it's a little bit around the edges, but actually, if the average age of a farmer is 59, and you've only got 30% of your time left, why would you want to spend it moaning about the weather, moaning about the government, moaning about the staff, moaning about the land, moaning about politicians, moaning. Now, this is not being cheesy and all Pollyanna and saying everything is wonderful, because if you're a farmer and you've been rained on for the whole of the spring, it can be a tad depressing. There's no doubt about that. So what do you think, Dave? Is it the way we look at life? How do we get more happy?
Do you remember the American cartoon Charlie Brown with Snoopy the dog?
Yes.
Yeah, Snoopy the dog. And there's a cartoon with a quote.
There's young people out there going, what's he talking about?
Yeah, for the hey kids, check out Charlie Brown and Snoopy on YouTube. There's a wonderful cartoon clip of Charlie Brown and Snoopy sitting on top of Snoopy's doghouse kennel, watching the sun go down, and Charlie Brown, who's renowned for being miserable, not like a farmer at all, of course, no. And Charlie Brown turns to Snoopy and goes, sometimes I think it gets really dark just before things get really black. And everything's like, oh. Now, we've got a choice. Let's be pragmatic about this. As Paul said, it can be quite an ethereal, fluffy subject. But actually, let's just get real. If you had a choice of being miserable or being happy, what would you want? If you wanted to work with miserable people or happy people, what would you choose? So instead of deliberately sabotaging ourselves with negative thoughts, negative outcomes, negative conversations, hanging around with mood hoovers, energy vampires, or the cows of this world, how about we hang around with a few rhinos, or deliberately introduce just a little bit lighter conversation? Just start with that, a bit lighter conversation. Consider the positive instead. How about deliberately building in, I know, maverick thought here, a bit of fun to the farm.
Whoa, we can't have
fun.
Farm fun. That's outrageous.
Outrageous.
Do you know how hard it is, this industry? You know how hard it is to work? So, I mean, I think the other thing to say, we started off by saying it might be a little bit fluffy and it can feel that way. But actually, happiness, if I drew you a formula, happiness equals increased profitability.
Yeah.
You'll make more money on your farm if your team are happy, if you're feeling happy. We perform better, we produce better results if we're happy. So whilst it might on the surface feel like a bit emotional and a bit fluffy, it's the hard reality of a successful organisation. Without wishing to plug it necessarily, but I'm about to, my book called Happy Team, Happy Farm is built around exactly that principle, that if people are happy, they will perform better. And even if you've got livestock, they'll be happy. Prince Charles will tell you, if you tell your crops, if you speak to them nicely, they'll grow better.
He was pilloried in the press for talking to plants, and then years later, who was proved right?
Exactly.
Oh, it's crazy. So it's about a choice. What do you want? We create our workplace. We create our private lives. You know, if you go home and wonder why your partner is miserable, maybe there's a clue in the way you walk through the door. There's some people, for example, I say this when I work with chief exec groups in industry. I say, do you work really hard during the week? You know, sometimes 100 hours in a week. They go, yeah. I says, do you find at a weekend on a Friday night, you drag yourself through the front door with the key in the latch, going, honey, I'm home, and you're looking for a good time, but you got no energy? Or do you burn yourself out at weekends and then drag your carcass into work on a Monday morning, you're going, hello? Well, don't both deserve the best of you.
The balance. Yeah.
And being of a happier disposition releases endorphin, serotonin, and this is all science, chemical stuff. This isn't stuff I haven't made up on the bus on the way here today. It releases dopamine, serotonin creates adrenaline, noradrenaline releases oxytocin, making you feel epic. And you can choose to do that, or you are choosing not to. So ask yourself, what are you choosing? Paul, anything else to say on the subject? They're getting happy.
Well, you almost nailed it at the end. Other than, I think from a work perspective, if we're thinking about our team, and you know that's what real success is really about, is the people in the team. People want to work for positive people. They don't want to work for unhappy and negative people. So if you're constantly moaning about life, don't be surprised if your staff do too.
There's a friend of ours called Tony Burgess and Julie French, and they talk about what ifing. So most people go, oh, what if it goes wrong? What if we fail? What if it doesn't work? Well, what if it does? What if everyone has a good time doing it? What if it really succeeds? How are we going to cope? Won't that be good? So try what ifing in a positive way rather than a negative one. Try it just for a week. See what happens. See you soon on another Drilling Down section.